don't have the PowerPoint? Oh, yeah, all you have is the PDF. Should have sent the PowerPoint, that's okay. So today we wanted to share with the board of directors and with our membership a recommendation for the future of the lodge. Just as two points as a quick introduction. This is something that was started back in June at President Parentow's direction to have this subcommittee. I won't bore you with that. You've seen it for the last 4 or 5 months. The other point that I would make is later on the agenda is a bar from the House and Beach Committee. There was some question about, including that here. That is a separate and actually a subset of this recommendation. It was not, it's from the committee. So we'll share with you what we've been working on, and then we can go from there. So the next slide, Kyla. As I indicated, this is something that was actually initiated in January. We've been reporting to the board every month for the last number of months. As part of that was to create a recommendation and to get input from the membership. As we had outlined back then, we wanted to do that through a showcase room. That was in February. That is completed. We have also done 2 town hall meetings downstate in April, the clubhouse in May. At least it's been reported that we had 37 people at the downstate town hall, not including those that dialed in. I think we had about 7 dialed in at that one. The clubhouse, again, estimated at 65, a number of people dialed in there as well, and certainly countless discussions and input from members as we go. Just as, again, Kyla, next slide, just a quick snapshot. This is the agenda that was presented at the town hall meetings where we reviewed the existing conditions, what were the options for improvements, how could we pay for that, and then specifically those were focused at getting member input, what did we want and how were we willing to pay for that, and ultimately discuss next steps. So let me share with you at least a summary prepared by our subcommittee, and again, that's Ronnie, Charlie, and myself with Ian as part of our group as well. So next slide. This is from the Town Hall, April 30th. This is actually the notes that were taken during that discussion, but in general, if we summarize that, it was not the intent, but the section where we actually reviewed the existing conditions seemed to be very compelling to the members. There was a lot of comment. Our lodge is in a rather poor condition, so what we heard is we need to take action. We must invest in our future. It was quite consistent. We also heard functional quality. There was a number of comments, and I'll share quickly the town hall comments that we don't need a Taj Mahal. We need something that's functional, and certainly something that's not expensive. We did do a general poll, a simple raise your hand. Are you willing to pay for this? And resoundingly, we got a yes from the people that participated in the April 30th town hall. But again, the message was, let's be prudent. This isn't trying to build a palace. On the next slide, this is the feedback from the May 18th town hall. Again, very similar feedback, but the note is to retain and attract members, we need better facilities and infrastructure. We need to make the common areas functional. Again, this is something that came out. And the other note was to make the common areas memorable. I didn't specifically highlight in these minutes here, as it didn't relate to our recommendation, but in both the town halls, there was a lot of comments about the beach, about Badger Lake, and how this is, the jewel of the club. So, while not in context here, certainly I think people want improvements in the beach, and they want to see the beach from our club. Again, the question was, are you willing to pay for it? The answer was a resounding yes. There was some questions whether people really supported it. So for those that were there, we asked the question again. And on a second return, people resoundingly said, yes, we need to do something, and yes, we need to pay for it. The question is how. And the further comments were, we want to make better use of the spaces we have and make a better use of the Badger Lake view. So that was a quick summary of our 2 town halls. Also, before we make our recommendation, I thought I'd review, this is from the March meeting, just a couple of points, next slide, from the showcase room feedback. And I just wanted to highlight a few. These are, again, the summaries presented here in March. One resounding point that we heard, again, through these member feedbacks and separately, is the showcase room. It looks awesome, a huge improvement. If we go to the next slide, what did you not like? Again, repeatedly we heard too expensive. You could even discuss with members and say, that tile, that's not any more expensive than the plain white tile. And the comment was still, it looks expensive. This isn't Lost Lake. So I think that was a clear message. Next slide. Resoundingly, we heard, do something in the great room. I don't know what we call it. We shouldn't call it a lobby, perhaps, but it's not a lobby. Let's make it cozy. The lobby is that little antechamber between the doors. The main area is, where we host events, where we meet our family members and hang out. The next slide. What is your vision for 2025? Throughout the discussion, again, a memorable members space. And I don't want to wait for wow. When we were showing the showcase rooms, one person in particular said, I don't want to come in the lobby and wait for the wow. I don't want to go to down the hall and wait for the wow. When I come in the clubhouse, I want to see improvements right away. Next slide. What is your vision for 2025? And the feedback was, the clubhouse needs to be a place for people to gather. That's adults, teens, and children, and that the front desk is not the first thing that we see. So with that, that's a quick summary of all the feedback that has taken place over the last several months. Let's review the recommendation. Next slide. So what is included in the recommendation? Our scope was to address the entire lodge facility. And so within our recommendation, we've addressed the lobby, the reception area, the gathering area, the dining, the exterior of the building. This is something that we didn't get a ton of specific, we haven't made or there's been specific discussions, but we've included some exterior discussions, lodging and offices, and certainly the downstairs. So we stayed within the footprint of this building, but those are the key areas that we addressed. So what are the specific recommendations? First, for the lodging, reception, and gathering. Certainly, we recommend that we revise the layout of the main gathering area to increase the effective use of that space. We are not recommending the specific proposals that were laid out at that meeting. This is not our specific recommendation. I think when we talk, like in the second point, it says a focus on a member's place to share stories, drinks, and food in a casual setting. There was resounding input to say, shouldn't the bar area be adjacent to the dining room? That's how it is efficient. That's, where upstairs where people would come and greet. Does that say the exact layout that was presented? No, but the concept of bringing those two facilities together, we heard, is efficient and is honestly like most hotels. You go in and you see the bar right next to the restaurant. I don't know why, other than that's probably close to the kitchen. The third specific recommendation in the lobby reception area is Ian had showed concepts for a new deck, doors, and windows off the existing dining room to support outdoor dining and cocktails. We have received very positive feedback that, within the dining room, it's a fairly closed area. There are windows, they're quite small, and generally, holding with the theme, we love Badger Lake, we want to look at Badger Lake, we want to open up and give that more open feel to this facility, that the deck, doors, and windows. Again, any specific items that were presented are only representative of what generated our recommendation. The next slide is exterior. Consistently, we've heard that it's important to maintain the iconic white building. Any discussions of citing it or whatever seemed both expensive and not consistent with what represents our club. If you look at our golf, scorecard, everywhere it has a picture of the lodge. However, as we, when this board discussed last year, putting in the front windows and entryway, there was a lot of discussion of the wow of having stonework at the entry. Absolutely, that is something that we would recommend, along with structural accents at the entrance. Again, there's more details behind how this might be executed, but those are specific elements that we think that we need to include. And the third bullet is some type of paving stone walkway out in the front, one to designate the pedestrian areas, to improve the aesthetics of the entryway. And it was also discussed that this could be used as a method for fundraising. You see in many communities, they have paver stones, put your name in the paving area. Next slide. As far as lodging and offices, certainly the feedback is to minimize investment in added infrastructure only to what is needed. We don't need to, again, build a palace. Our recommendation, and I do have the backup slides, not intending to go through this detail here other than how the board might ask for additional details, but our recommendation was 36 rooms plus the addition of staff offices upstairs. If we're looking at rearranging downstairs and making the reception area downstairs but more focused on reception, Ian has expressed need for offices, and we certainly have space to do that. I would note in passing, the prior study done in 2014 recommended 30 lodge rooms. We do have occasions where we book all 50 rooms, but as been shown in a number of studies, that's literally 2 or 3 nights a year, and most of our usage is at 30 and below, or 35 and below. But again, our specific recommendation was 36. The next point was specifically to increase the number of suites. The feedback was when people don't want just individual rooms, they want suites. When we were presenting the data at the town halls, if you look at the utilization of the rooms with queen beds, we just need more queens, we need more suites. And certainly, one of the other things that came out repeatedly, our recommendation is that House and Beach and management consider revising the reservation policy for better utilization and fairness. The comments that we received is there are weekends that people want to stay in the lodge, but those are the weekends you can't get it. July 4th, Trout Derby, and that very often for those specific weekends, it's the same members who not have 1 room or 2 rooms, but a block of rooms reserved. So there needs to be some consideration given, certainly if we try to make better utilization of the rooms we have, that we somehow control that to ensure that one person doesn't reserve the rooms and goes in the first day and blocks the whole lodge. And the other part of that policy is specifically, very often, and I know it's been my personal experience just recently, is that if 6 months in advance you try to get a room for July 4th weekend, or in my case last weekend, there's not a room available. But if you go up to the front desk on the day of or the day before, those rooms are available. So people are reserving them in case they have guests, but if people don't come up, then they don't utilize them. So there's some belief, no strong evidence, but within our data that our utilization is low because You know, it's kind of, you know, if somebody comes up, they need it, but if something happens, the weather's bad, grandma dies, you know, there's some issues there in whether we're executing our existing policy. Anyway, got a little off track, I apologize. Next area is downstairs. Specifically in the presentation Ian prepared, he showed a gathering area for members only. We got very positive feedback about that. In particular, a business office where members can stay connected. You know, very often people up here come connected. They say they want additional connections, but the business office. And the third was a new workout room. And again, the discussion was using an existing space in the dungeon where windows could be installed and actually have windows into the workout space. So that is the general scope of our comments of what we recommend. The next step is next slide, is the phased approach. Certainly, as we presented in the town hall meeting, there's been many discussions about doing a phased approach, and it certainly makes sense. This is our specific recommendation. Again, this is up to board discussion next. Certainly, this is up to further development as the project proceeds, but our recommendation is that it's a 3-year project timeline, that phase 1 is specifically the main gathering areas. That's the lobby, reception, dining, and front deck. Included with that would be the term exterior, but as you saw, the front entryway, stonework, those items. That was, again, specifically chosen to the member feedback. You know, over half of our rooms are used by guests, probably higher since members often reserve multiple rooms. So we don't think it's necessarily just members. We're not discounting the rooms because the lodge and offices is in phase 2, and then phase 3 would be the downstairs. That would also allow some utilization. As an example, if the lobby and dining is under construction, Glass Tour Lounge would be available for dining experiences. The specific, I thought I had in here the timeline, maybe that's on the next slide.
Well,
Can I finish the presentation, please?
right, but I'm just saying, on phase 2, you use the word lodge. What do you mean by lodge?
Lodge is rooms, lodging rooms, and offices. Again, the clarification of language is something somehow through this construction we need to affect. The next slide, as far as recommendation of funding, as we've seen, you know, at least one taking the prior phased approach from House and Beach, and whether what was presented is exactly what they recommended. That was a 4-phase and roughly about $1.1 million. Our recommendation is a $1.6 million total budget for the project. I note no exclusions. One of the comments to avoid any backbiting or concerns. There are, for example, windows scheduled for lodge rooms within the existing 20-year budget. You know, we don't want to say, oh, well, it's 1.6 million, plus we got some other things buried here in the budget. So the point is that you know, to prepare and outline this, that there would be no exclusions. Everything that we're going to do needs to be included and shown within that and captured within $1.6 million. And our request is specifically for the finance and audit. Our recommendation is for them to prepare a funding recommendation for that total, to include construction contingencies. Anytime there's a major project, construction contingencies need to be included. Within our subcommittee, we didn't have the experience to say, should that be included in the total funding? Should it be set aside as additional funds? We would request finance and audit to look at that. The other portion of this is it should also include funding of other planned and needed capital projects. Previously, you know, there's been some discussion that we could spend $800,000 on the lodge based on the 20-year capital plan, but that did not include any funding for paving Fox Road and the parking lots. We now know that within the next 2 to 3 years, that needs to be done. So we don't want to, you know, again, try to surprise members and say, oh, here's 1.6, but there's another big project hanging out there. So we want to include all those others. And certainly we need to be cognizant of the implementation of previously approved operations dues increase. A number of people said, you know, we are currently in the middle of a 5.55 dues increase. Next year, dues are going up $5. Any recommendation that they make, we think, probably shouldn't include an operations dues increase next year on top of an ongoing dues increase.
Can you say it again? I didn't follow you. I'm sorry. Can you just repeat what you said?
That any recommendation should consider the fact that there is already an approved $5 operation increase next year.
Okay.
So any proposal that is made and voted on by the membership, probably, it's up to their recommendation, shouldn't include like a capital dues increase next year on top of the already $5. You know, we already have $5 next year that'll be increased. Again, that is just our personal recommendation as far as for their consideration. Certainly the Finance and Audit Committee assessments is another discussion that has been had. There is some discussion of what that specific dollar amount might be, but we also didn't know the total. So at this point, you know, our discussion is we think we need about $1.6 million in improvements in this facility. And then, you know, specifically, how do we pay that? How do we make sure that we also take care of Fox Road? We need that recommendation from Finance and Audit. And then the last slide, and I won't just make the motion yet, but the intent would be to make a motion to direct management to create a detailed plan and membership ballot. As we've discussed here as a board, we want the membership. We don't want to start spending money that drives additional requirements from the membership to pay without having that membership support as a ballot. We also know right now we have a concept and a vision. We don't have a detailed plan. So our motion would be to include the total cost and funding for the project, a timeline that includes the major milestones, that we would authorize the manager to spend an additional $25,000 for design and engineering services. He needs to define exactly what this looks like. He needs to come back with, you know, a floor plan, not a concept, and that they would prepare a ballot for the board of director consideration at the August meeting. So that's the primary content. I had one other thing I wanted to say before I made the motion. I guess the last comment is that as the subcommittee of the board, this completes our, you know, I believe the agenda item says, and next steps. You know, for this subcommittee, our assignment, our scope was to create this recommendation. We have provided that. This is a recommendation to the board for discussion and completion of our subcommittee work. And so those next steps is open to the board. And I didn't see it in the presentation, by the way. We did discuss that phase one would start, at least we have discussed, that prepare a plan so that it would start immediately following Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving weekend of 2019. If you look at, we do rent a few rooms at Christmas time, not so much, but you know, certainly if we create the plan and the membership approves it, we want to show them results right away. So with that, I would make the motion that is indicated in the presentation.
Thank you, Doyle. So we have a motion on the floor to accept the recommendation as written by the subcommittee.
Yes.
Do I have support for that?
Yes.
Okay, it's seconded. I'll open it to board discussion.
It was seconded, you said?
I thought you did.
I said first, but second, yeah, whatever.
Doyle made the motion, so I need somebody to
Yeah, I
second it.
second it. I have, start discussion one. I think that was a really big job that you guys went through. I think that's pretty cool. I love that you referenced back to all the great work that a previous board had done on this project. You referenced it during the discussion. because even though we didn't move forward with that, they certainly brought forth a ton of great information we were able to, use. So, I mean, so they deserve some credit as well. With that said, as far as the steps that we would take, will we consider what the, construction, I can't think of the word right now, the, project managers would decide should be first? The only reason I ask is I would hate to see, we're doing the lobby and all of a sudden we find out, or whatever we're calling that, upstairs, to down here, that we started that and all of a sudden we needed to tear it up because we needed to run wiring or pipes through or whatever. Maybe that's a bad analogy, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, and exactly, that's why the point is to direct management to create a detailed plan.
So the flow of work may change based on what the contractors, was the word I was looking
Yes,
for.
and what is presented in August is not necessarily this recommendation. What we're trying to do now as a board to provide guidance to management, you know, we've always said chicken or the egg.
Right.
Well, at this point, this is a concept that if we can all agree upon, we're trying to authorize management and give them very specific direction. Now, if they choose, if they get in, you know, certainly sequence of events is a big item. When they get involved, you know, certainly the layout that has been prepared, I've gotten a number of negative comments that you love the dining next to the lounge, but I don't know if we like the lounge right by the front door in an open space. Irrespective, this is for management, and they may consider one or two layouts that they would come to the membership and even do.
Well, my concern is too, is that, you know, like I might want the rooms first for what I think might be great, or I might think the great rooms next to the dining rooms next. I think ultimately, I would want the best use of materials and labors to decide what was first. And it sounds like that's the path we're headed.
If I can just add to Dora's comments, through this whole process, you know, we've been very clear that the goal has been to make better use of the existing space. The intent is not to go on a full-blown destruction and reconstruct project. So everything as we move forward with the design and concept that we've been working on has been looking at the infrastructure and working around the existing infrastructure. Your comment about, you know, tearing stuff out or adding new pipes and stuff, we don't anticipate that there is going to be a need for that. There may be some upgrades because of deterioration in some of the infrastructure, but not to the point that we would be tearing down existing work. The other part of this is, you know,